Hello, World History students. Miss Edelyn speaking, and we're going to finish off the Low Middle Ages by talking about how Europe is going to kind of crawl out of the problems that they've been having and kind of get more established into the High Middle Ages, which of course leads us to the Renaissance and a real great time of innovation and all. So what we're going to see is the return of cities and the return of trade, but we have to start with something basic. We've got to start with agriculture. You have to feed people, and that way you can come up with innovation. So this growth is going to be slow and steady from 1000 to 1300 AD, and it's going to be revived by farming technologies that basically made the fields more productive. So let's talk about those inventions. First, the heavy plow. We needed a heavy plow. We'd been using the plow from the Mediterranean region that had the finer soil, and the soil was so much thicker in Europe. And so now we can cut the soil better. That means we can go faster, and we can plant more. We can plant crops that have deeper roots and so on. Up until now, the only harness they had could fit an ox. It would choke a horse to death. So once they were able to harness up a horse, we know that horses are faster, therefore we can put in more crops, have larger fields as also more food. And just think of the term horsepower, and you won't be able to forget that one. We're also going to use windmills for a couple of reasons. I've got to grind grain on here, but also windmills were used to pump the land. So you might want to jot that one down. I'm sorry I don't have it on the slide, but to drain this extra water off the land, like in the Netherlands, so that they had more usable land that wasn't covered with water. Peasants are also going to adopt a three-field system. We saw a picture of the manor where they had the spring field, the autumn field, the fallow field. And in this example on the slide, they just planted different kinds of crops so that the soil, and then they would rotate these, okay? The legumes would be in one area one time, and then they would be moved over the next time, enriching the soil. And legumes are just like peas and the kind of plants that, again, would restore nitrogen to the soil, basically. And all of this is going to increase the food production and lead to a population explosion, between 1000 and 1300, which is going to lead to a demand of goods, okay? If you have a demand of goods, and also we had a decline in violence, and we're going to see an increase of trade. It becomes safer to trade. And at first we're just going to have local trade fairs. Think of I know out here in Franklin we have the Main Street Festival. It would be kind of like that because they actually took place near a river or a busy trade route where a couple of trade routes would come together. They would just kind of set up for a week, a couple weeks. Sometimes if it became popular, they would stay there longer. If there was a castle nearby, they might use the protection of the castle, and people just flocked to these fairs. And they went from just being a week to maybe being all summer, and then they might start wintering over at the castle. Yeah, that's what I just said. Okay. Eventually, artisans tried to get near the merchants, so then you had this good thing happening where you had artisans right next to the merchants. And so slowly you would see these centers of trade start to evolve. Now the early cities might reach 10,000 people, and that was big since the fall of Rome, but compared to Rome it was very small because Rome itself had over 1 million people. Eventually merchants would start to draw up written agreements in these little towns, and these were charters. Now that's one of your vocab words. Again, it's a written agreement, and it was asking the lord or the king to protect the interest of the merchants by securing the town's rights. And the people who live there, not just the merchants, but the merchants are really running the show. I want to make sure you understand that. And by the way, kings love merchants because merchants, unlike feudal lords, do not want to fight because fighting disrupts trade. So they would a lot of times sign these charters and give the merchants the freedom they wanted. And the early towns did have walls around them. They were rather haphazardly built. And if any of you read about the medieval towns, you knew they were crowded, dirty places, and that's why disease will spread pretty easily. Now, all of this evolution of agriculture, trade, is going to lead to a commercial revolution that we're still feeling the effects of today. And we're talking about the birth of capitalism here, okay? So let's see what happened. Of course, merchants are going to need money to buy goods, and you can't just barter everything, and it's very inconvenient. We talked about that earlier in the year. So this reintroduction of money we're also going to see the development of some other business practices that made things more convenient to do. So I will ask you about these business practices and innovations, so make sure you get these down, okay? First of all, we've just said we're going to start to use money, but we're going to use money not just to buy something, but we're going to use it for investment or capital. So there's one of your vocab words, capital. And that's the first time we're going to use money to make money, okay? We're also going to see the growth of banking houses. In the beginning, they just changed out money, like your money might be different in one part of Europe than another part. But eventually we're going to see it being used for investment purposes. And then we also would see partnerships evolve in which people would pool their money so that in case the business failed, you didn't lose everything. You only lost the part that you put in because you were in a partnership. So see how each one of these things is lowering risk to individuals. Another way to lower risk was to get insurance, and one of the oldest insurance houses is Lloyd's of London. But you will buy insurance in case there is like an accident with a shipment of goods. Your goods are covered, and so you would get refunded some of the money. You wouldn't lose everything in case you lost your goods. And then last but not least, there was an item that was developed that was called the Bill of Exchange. And basically you could travel without carrying heavy money with you, like coins, that would make it kind of inconvenient and obvious that you might get robbed. Bill of Exchange was just a piece of paper from your bank that said, like how much money you had, and it was signed by the banker, and you could travel and pick up your goods and give them the Bill of Exchange that guaranteed that they would get the money from that bank. For a bonus point, if you will email me what this Bill of Exchange sounds like that we use, some of us still today, okay? Anyway, all of these items again, let me go back real quick. The banking houses, the partnerships, the insurance, and the Bill of Exchange are lowering risk on investment or capital. Now, all of this is going to lead to social changes. I mean, you're revolutionizing Europe here, okay? You're feeding everybody, you're increasing your population, increasing trade, and you're having the growth of cities, and now you have the growth of finance and people are starting to live better, okay? That's going to lead to social change. And it reshaped medieval society. We're going to undermine feudalism, okay? We're kind of cutting the ties that bind us to this feudalism that was good in the beginning for protecting us, but it's not really a good form of government. So peasants are going to start to become tenant farmers in some cases, or they're getting paid, or they might pay a rent to the lord instead of being a serf. So you're going to have more free peasants. In towns, you're going to see a new middle class start to emerge. Oh, and by the way, if you were a serf and you could get into a town and you could live there for a whole year, you could become free. okay, of the Lord. One thing the church forbade was that Christians should become money lenders, and this is known as usury. That's a vocab word, and that's just the lending of money at interest to gain, something from the money that you lend. So that means that usually that fell to the Jews in those early days to lend money, and so you will see a lot of Jewish people go into the banking business because the church, again, forbade Christians from doing it. Now, we're also going to see the development of guilds during this time period. These are associations, if you just remember them as a group of people coming together. And we'll talk about a couple of different kind of guilds. One is a merchant guild, and the other one is a craft guild that the artisans were a part of. Now, merchant guilds appeared first because they controlled the whole town life. They passed the laws and levied taxes and made important decisions, all right? And they're going to really run the show. They're getting the charter from the king and so on. A craft guild, on the other hand, was the workers in a particular trade, like all the bakers or all the shoemakers or etc. They might be tanners of leather, whatever. And to prevent competition, they would only let a certain number of people in the town work in a type of trade. They tightly controlled it. Becoming a guild member involved many years of hard work. And at the age of 7, if you wanted to go into a certain trade, a child might become an apprentice or a trainee to a guild master. And that basically meant that you just ran errands. You might live under, like if it was a shoemaker, if he had a bench, you might sleep under that bench and do all the work for him. Now, you wanted to work for the guild master because you would learn a valuable skill. So don't think that life was terrible for them. It's not any worse than becoming a knight, for sure. After 7 years, a trainee could become a journeyman. And all that means is he's going to get a salary. He's not just living for free under the bench anymore. He's doing his own thing. But still, in many cases, they still worked for the master, okay? And then to become a master was really difficult. First of all, you have to produce a masterpiece in many cases. You have to be really good. If you were related to a master, you could take over the business. Or if the town was big enough, you could open your own business. But it was hard to become a master. Most men had to stay as journeymen or just salaried workers. Women did work in dozens of crafts. They could inherit their husband's or father's workshops. They did dominate some trades and even had their own guilds. And that's the end, my dears. So I will see you next class. Be ready with your medieval packet.